This podcast is for anyone who has ever felt stuck, whether it's a major life transition, a dark night of the soul, or just staying small out of fear. If you've ever struggled to move forward, if you're repeating unhealthy patterns in relationships, or you have a black belt in beating yourself up, you were meant for more, and this podcast is for you. We'll get real, we'll get vulnerable, we'll probably cuss a little bit, and we'll get to the root of it all, your self-worth. With every step, you'll find the courage to rise. I want to ask you a question. Where in your life have you felt shame? What is it that you are carrying shame around? Is it a particular event? Is it something that you did, a singular event? Or was it a series of events? Is it something that has led to something in your life like credit card debt, for example? Where do you feel shame in your life? Because I'm going to let you in on a secret. Shame and staying stuck in shame and allowing ourselves to go down the shame spiral is what keeps us from moving forward in our life. More than anything else, shame blocks our healing. It blocks our forward progress. It blocks us from really owning and really moving forward through something. It's like we have this thing inside of us in this little closet in some part of our being where we keep whatever it is that we carry this shame around, and we keep it locked away so that no one else will see it. Because it's the thing that we are the most deeply terrified that we will be judged for, that we will be rejected for, that we will be abandoned for. And it's the thing that even if you have, maybe a friend or a partner, someone in your life with whom you share everything, but you don't share this because it is so deep within you and you think, my goodness, they accept me for so much else, but there's no way they'll accept me for this. This will be the thing that causes them to push me away. And the truth of it is, it doesn't even have to be anything big. I'll use an example in my own life of where this really came up for me. And shame shows up in a lot of different ways, right? It can be over little things. It can be over big things, that inner judge that's telling us all the reasons why we should have done something different, or really beating ourselves up. This is part of where that self-abuse comes from, is a self-shaming. But so for me, an example was, I have, obviously, as I've shared with you guys in the first episode, I've been married and divorced twice. I have my fair share of shrapnel on the relationship highway. And for the most part, that was something that I really didn't have as hard of a time talking about. Certainly there were some things that I haven't talked about openly until recently, but it was something that wasn't as hard for me to talk about. The fact that I'd been married and divorced twice wasn't fun, but I carried a little bit of shame around it, but I largely worked through it. But the thing that really for 20 years that I kept in that closet of my own was that I carried credit card debt. And I was so ashamed of how poorly I managed my finances in that area because, outwardly, here I am. I have this successful career. I'm making great money. I have everything working in my favor, but I carried credit card debt. I spent money I didn't have, and I got into debt. And the reasons I got into debt, there are a lot of reasons for it, and the ways that I was using that to compensate for ways I was unhappy in my life. And we'll talk about that in future episodes in terms of how we all use that, right, as a way to sometimes put a Band-Aid over something and try to get a quick fix. But, I was certainly doing that. And I was willing to talk about a lot of other things in my life, but that was the one thing that I was terrified to share with other people because I thought, my goodness, everybody else has it together. Everybody else has their finances figured out and I don't. And it was something that I didn't start to heal my relationship with money until I finally stepped out of the shame that I had around it. And I'm no longer in debt, and I've healed that relationship that I had around why I was repeating those patterns in the first place. But the real thing that stopped me for all those years was that I was so ashamed to talk about it. I was ashamed to talk to my best friend about it. I was ashamed to talk to anybody about it, which also means that you're inherently too ashamed to ask for the help and support you need. You just keep it locked away. And the thing is that those things don't stay locked away, right? It's like a little monster that you keep in the closet that just grows and grows and grows over time. But the breakthrough for me, that after all the things that I had done for all those years, was finally owning it and finally stepping out of the shame around it and really getting brave and saying, yep, this has been my pattern and it has been keeping me from moving into where I really want to be. And coming back to that idea of pain and pleasure, eventually the pain around something gets so high that you're forced to do something about it. And for me, the pain of being in that debt and the things that it was keeping me from in my life and the ways that it was holding me back finally got strong enough that it was a stronger pain than the pain I felt around facing the shame of admitting the financial, mistakes or missteps that I had made over the years. But my point in telling you that story is that shame is the thing that blocks us from healing something. It's the thing that blocks us from moving forward. And I have these conversations with clients all the time, and it just came up again the other day. As we are learning and as we are healing and as we are, just learning about our patterns and taking these things into daily life, we're going to trip, we're going to fall, right? We're going to make mistakes because, see previous podcast, perfect is bullshit, and humans that's what happens, right? We make mistakes. But when we keep ourselves stuck in that perfectionism and we expect ourselves to always be perfect and we don't allow ourselves to make mistakes, we stay stuck in that shame spiral, which means we're not actually growing and moving forward. And so the conversation that I had with my client, there was a situation that happened with her partner that we'd been working through and had been doing some coaching around. And, a situation came up that she shared with me. And it was the first thing I was like, no shame. There's no shame. You're learning. We can't, because if you shame yourself for making a mistake, or if you shame yourself for maybe tripping back into an old pattern for a period of time, then what happens is it gets blown out of proportion. And all of a sudden this story spins out that, I haven't learned anything. I haven't grown. And then we start shoulding on ourselves, right? I should know better. And it starts this whole shame spiral, and we get pulled down into this really disempowered state rather than stop, take a breath, just own it. Yep. Ooh, I tripped up again. Okay. All right, cool. Let me think about this. Let me work through this. Let me figure out why that happened and what I learned from it. It's the difference in staying locked in the shadows and staying locked in your own self-loathing. And the difference is stepping into the light and owning the fact that we're all human. We all make mistakes. And as long as we're doing the best we can to learn, then that's what matters. And realizing that anytime we feel that shame come up, and what that feels like, we've all felt it, it's part of the human condition. But the shame, it stops us from learning. It blocks us from healing and growing because we're too busy feeling horrible about what has happened and feeling like somehow we're the pariah or we're really deeply not worthy. And when we stay stuck in that, there's no way that we can move out of it. When we stay stuck in shame, it means we're not asking for help or support from, people or resources that could support us through that. It means we are not even willing to face whatever it is that's coming up for us. And as long as we stay in that, we won't move forward. And the thing that I want to share is that this is a common experience. And I guarantee you, whatever horrible thing you think it is about you that has happened or that you feel is your dirty little secret, other people understand. Someone out there has had that same experience. What I learned when I finally started talking about, my finances, when I finally started owning up to the other women in my life in particular, and I say women, not to exclude men, but what occurred to me during this whole time is that we as women will go to brunch and we will talk about all manner of things. We will talk about the men we're dating, we'll talk about the trips we've taken, we'll talk about all kinds of things, but we won't talk about our money. And that's something that really came front and center to me as I realized when I finally started bringing this topic up that the other women around me were working, a lot of them were working through the same things, right? Not all of them, but the ones that weren't were oftentimes the ones that could then help me or help us with ideas about investments or resources or whatever it was. Because when you're willing to step out of that shame spiral and open up to other people, and then it started conversations with other people in my life who were also working their way out of debt, who were equally as ashamed of where they were and had been equally as unwilling to talk about it because they probably were going through the same thing and feeling like it was just them. But what came from that is we were able to start to support each other and say, okay, well, let's try to find some free things to do, or let's try to find ways that we can still have fun and not spend money. And let's get creative about talking about ways that we can make more money, right? It changes the whole conversation. And that's just one example of how when you are willing to step out of that shame closet, right? Take that little monster out of the shame closet and realize that it's actually not that scary. And, even if there's something that you've dealt with that's happened or that you've done that you carry so much deep shame around, then you need to find the right resource or someone that you really deeply trust where you can take the step through that fear and talk about it. Because once you talk about it, even when you admit it the first time, or even when you give voice to it for the first time, it will feel like you have dropped an entire load of bricks. Literally, you will feel the energetic shift because it's a load that you've been carrying. It's an energetic weight that you've been carrying for so long that even if you don't realize it, is drawing your energy away from you. It's drawing you down. It's keeping you in a lower vibration. And so whatever it is that you're feeling shame come up around, again, whether it's, maybe something big, or maybe it's something that just happened, maybe an incident that happened, or, you did something in a conversation or said something that you wish you hadn't, keeping yourself in shame, beating yourself up, keeping yourself in shame around anything that has happened to you, anything you've done, a lot of times as we're working through healing work in particular, and I mean, when we're healing things that have led us to patterns, particularly in relationships, sometimes we have shame around, oh my gosh, like I can't believe I let him or her treat me that way, or, I can't believe that I put up with that for so long, and we carry a shame story around it. But the longer we do that, the longer it's going to take us to move forward and to move through it. So what does it look like to step out of that shame spiral? It's taking a breath. It's noticing, first of all, when it comes up for you and when you feel it, because you know how shame feels. It feels very common for all of us. It's a heat in our body, a heaviness in our body. Notice when it comes up, whether it's, if you've made a mistake at work, or whether it's something that is bigger than that. Notice it and recognize it and see it for what it is. And the alternative to shame is instead you take a breath and you own it. That's self-responsibility. You own it and say, yeah, I did that. I made that mistake, or I made that series of mistakes, or yeah, I did that old thing that I thought I didn't do anymore. And you don't let it take on a life of its own. You stand up and take that deep breath, and you stand up with as much courage, as much bravery as you can possibly muster, even if it's just a little bit sometimes, and look it in the eye and own it. That is the antidote for shame, is love and compassion and just ownership. Because when you take ownership of it, when you're really willing to look at it, going back to the example that I gave, when I was finally ready to take ownership and to really look at the spending patterns that I had and the financial patterns that I had, when I was ready to take a breath and step out of the spiral of shame and beating myself up for it and keeping myself locked in this pattern because I wasn't allowing myself to heal it because I was too busy kicking my own ass around the block about it. When you step out of that, that's when you start to heal. When you own it, when you are no longer ashamed of it, nothing anyone else says to you is going to rattle you because you own it. And when you own it, that means you're going to take the steps to either make sure it doesn't happen again or get the resources or support you need. You're ready and willing to move that out of your life because you are taking full ownership of it with compassion and without judgment and without beating yourself up. Because if nothing else, shame is wildly inefficient. And what is efficient, and I say this for those of us that have well-developed left brains and analytical sides, what is efficient is just stop, take a breath, send it love, accept wherever you are. This comes back to accepting your starting point. Drop the shame around it. Accept your starting point, and from that place, you can finally move forward. So remember that. And I say this all the time, but one of my favorite phrases is own your shit, because when you own your shit, you literally are taking ownership of your life. You're taking control of your life, and you are no longer vulnerable to toxicity externally or toxicity within yourself. You're owning it. You're ready to take the steps. And when you do that, that puts you in such an empowered state. It doesn't mean that your life is perfect overnight. Again, perfect doesn't exist. It doesn't mean that everything you wake up and it's all of a sudden sunshine and unicorns, but it means that you're ready to take the steps. Or it means that you're ready to learn whatever you needed to learn from the moment. Let's say you make a mistake at work, and if you're spending all that time beating yourself up for having made a mistake, then you're not actually using that time to learn why a mistake was made and to learn, to ask yourself, what can I learn from this and how can I do things differently next time? Because one of the greatest acts of self-love and one of the biggest steps that you can take towards shifting that feeling of self-worth within yourself is to drop that shame story, to drop shame, and to instead embrace that compassionate ownership of wherever you are, and embrace the compassion for yourself for whatever it was that happened, big or small, and move forward from that. Drop the shame, move forward from a place of acceptance and a place of love. And that is how you will start to move forward in every area of your life and in whatever area is causing you the most blocks. And the last takeaway that I want to leave you with is know that it's not just you, that shame is something that everyone in the human experience works with. And the more that you, as an individual, are willing to take ownership and to stop that shame spiral, the more you're going to inspire others around you to do the same. So next time you feel that shame come up, stop, take a breath, choose compassion instead. Choose compassion and ownership, and choose to move forward in your life in whatever that moment is. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Courage to Rise podcast. Visit my website, couragetorise.com, for more information on one-on-one coaching, group coaching programs, and other upcoming events. Remember, life's too short not to sparkle. Sparkle on.